every year, a brand new NBA champion is crowned. That team, of course, is deemed the best. However, the term the best can be very tricky. And the fact is, every champ is not created equal. And some champs are better than others for sure, but some are unquestionably worse. And the same thing can be said of the losing opponents, or the runner-ups. In a world of constantly evolving statistics, there are numerous ways to try to find and determine the better and worse NBA runner-ups. From a historical perspective, there's regular season record, postseason record, margin of victory, and strength of opponent, all of which are very legit stats. But of course, none of those take into account the league as a whole. When the league started in 1946, there were 11 teams. Now, there are 30 teams. The simple fact is, athletes might even be better, and the game has definitely got more complex, and we're going to be moving on to more of that into the next decade. All that being said, let's rank all the NBA Finals losers from this century and find out whether they were great, good, average, or well, at least they tried. Before we get into it, make sure you hit the bell and subscribe. Let's get started. The year 2000, the Indiana Pacers lost to the Lakers 4-2. So I'm gonna put them on average. The Lakers were actually outscored in the finals by the Pacers, even though they won the series. Pacers had a good core and a good squad, but Reggie Miller was 34, Dale Davis was 30, Rick Smits was 33, and Mark Jackson was 34. So they were a bit up there. The Lakers, of course, with Shaq and Kobe and all that youth and talent, beat the Pacers in 6 games. So it really was closer than it should have been, so we give the Pacers that. Next is 2001, the Philadelphia 76ers with AI. Lost the series to the Lakers 4-1. And even though Allen Iverson was the MVP, there just wasn't enough help, so at least they tried. This series was a final series when Shaq and Kobe were playing their best ball together, which was only troublesome for a 76ers team that featured MVP Allen Iverson and Defensive Player of the Year Dikembe Mutombo. But Mutombo couldn't stop Shaq. Even though the Sixers shockingly got Game 1, 107-101, the Lakers eventually captured the series and the title, winning by an absurd average margin of 12.8 points per game in the playoffs. There was only so much that Iverson can do, as he threw everything he could at the Lakers D and averaged 35.6 points, 5.6 rebounds, 3.8 assists, and 1.8 steals. That was only enough to get them to 5 games against the most dominant player of all time in Kobe Bryant. Next is 2002, the New Jersey Nets. They got swept 4-0 by the Lakers. At least they tried. This was a New Jersey Nets team that had never gone to the finals before. The Nets started Todd McCullough at center, and to no surprise, Shaq was feasting inside and torched the Nets. Big Diesel averaged 36.3 points, 12.3 boards, 3.8 assists, and 2.8 blocks. Nets guard Jason Kidd, who finished runner-up for MVP that season, brought his team a fight. He put up 20.8 points, 7.3 rebounds, 9.8 assists, and 2.3 steals, but that just wasn't enough. Shaq and Kobe were simply unstoppable, and the Nets, they couldn't even get a game. Now on to 2003, the New Jersey Nets once again. They lost to the Spurs 4-2. They won 49 games and the Atlantic Division title, and heading into the finals, they won 10 straight games. 2 in the 6th-round first-round win over the Milwaukee Bucks, and 2 4-game sweeps over the Boston Celtics and the Detroit Pistons. However, that just wasn't enough, and they came short again. At least they got 2 games though in the Spurs, and this was the NBA Finals first series that featured former ABA teams. Then we move on to 2004. The LA Lakers, they lost to the Pistons shockingly 4-1. This Lakers team goes under average as a finals opponent. No one truly knew how many internal problems this Lakers team had at that time. On paper, this team looked like a fantasy team with Shaq, Kobe, Karl Malone, and Gary Payton, even though those other two were kinda on the outside of their career. However, none of that impressed the Pistons, who were anchored by the point guard Chauncey Billups and the rugged physical defense of Big Ben Wallace and Rasheed Wallace. After the Lakers tied up the series at 1 apiece with a 99-91 Game 2, Detroit went on to win the next 3 games by an average of 13 points. And the Lakers' collapse became apparent in the days following the finals. Head coach Phil Jackson resigned. Shaq was traded to the Heat, Gary Payton was dealt to the Celtics, and Karl Malone was left alone. And that resulted in Karl Malone retiring before the start of the 2005-06 season. Now on to 2005, the Detroit Pistons lost to the great San Antonio Spurs in a hard-fought 7-game series. We put them under great. This was Detroit's second straight finals with that great core team, Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, and the 2 Wallaces. The 05 Pistons won 54 games and defeated AI's Sixers, Reggie Miller's Pacers, and D-Wade's Heat on their way to the finals. However, the Spurs, who played a defensive style similar to the Pistons, would defeat them in a hard-fought Game 7, 81-74. The Pistons and the Spurs battled fiercely, with the overtime thriller in Game 5 serving as a crucial game. Yet anyone could talk about the series afterwards as if it was dull. And it's very unlikely we'll ever see a defensive series like that again. Now on to 2006, Dallas Mavericks lost to the Miami Heat 4-2. We're going to put them under average. The Mavericks had a better record and faced tougher teams to get to the finals, and that was prevalent as they went up 2-0 over the Miami Heat. They even could have went up 3-0 as they led by 13 in Game 3 with just 6 minutes to go. However, D-Wade and the Heat, they refused to roll over and they won 98-96. The Mavericks' inability to stop D-Wade, who would go on to average an incredible 34.7 points per game, eventually led to the Mavs. They just fell off. Now to 2007, the Cleveland Cavaliers, who lost to the Spurs with a good sweeping of 4-0. At least they tried. The Cavs were led by a young and promising LeBron James. The problem was, it was almost like a one-man show, facing a Spurs team coached by the great Greg Popovich and defensive talents like Bruce Bowen, Tim Duncan, and Tony Parker. And the team held down LeBron to just 22 points per game on just 35% shooting from the field. Was just too much for a young LeBron at that time. Then to 2008, the Los Angeles Lakers lost to the Boston Celtics 4-2. We're going to put them as average. The Lakers simply had no answer for the big three of Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce. And despite them getting the Spanish star Pau Gasol, the Lakers, they just couldn't close the gap against the Celtics. They imposed good defense on Kobe, who averaged just 25 points per game in the 6-game finals. Yeah, I know 25 is still good, but it's not great to win. Then 2009, the Orlando Magic lost to the LA Lakers 4-1. At least they tried. The Orlando Magic were the 3rd seed in the East and a perfect matchup for the Lakers, similar to how the 07 Cavs were an ideal matchup for the Spurs. But there's this thing called finals experience, and the Magic didn't have any of that. Dwight Howard averaged 15 points and 15 rebounds in the NBA Finals. But that was just a slight challenge, as Phil Jackson and Kobe Bryant were ready to handle anything. So the Lakers won the relatively easy series in 5 games. This was the first NBA Finals to go the full 7 games since 2005, and only the 4th since the NBA Finals returned to a 2-3-2 format in 1985. The Celtics went through a tough Eastern Conference bracket and eventually eliminated the best team in the league, an MVP winner LeBron James, and the Cleveland Cavaliers in a 6-game Eastern Conference semifinal. The Lakers really caught fire in the Western Conference playoffs. Once in the finals, the Celtics provided a real test, and it took the Lakers 7 games, along with a key injury to Celtics center Kendrick Perkins in Game 6, to get over the hump. In the end, Kobe finished with averages of 28.6 points and 8 rebounds per game as he won his 2nd consecutive Finals MVP. And this series really helped cement Kobe as one of the greatest of all time. He really put on. Now on to 2011, the Miami Heat lost to the Mavericks 4-2. Any team with LeBron and D Wade and Chris Bosh in their prime? That's great. The Heat became the supervillains of the NBA with LeBron, Chris Bosh, and D Wade joining down south. But once they reached the finals, the Heat were in a fragile state. Once they blew a fourth quarter lead in Game 2, the team started to fold mentally. And what came next was one of the most heroic 3-game stretches in league history. Dirk posted 23.7 points and 9.3 rebounds a game over the 3 contests, including multiple clutch shots. Other veteran players like Jason Terry and Shawn Marion came up big in Jason Kidd. While D Wade had a magnificent series putting up 26.5 points per game, it was LeBron who failed to show up. To this day, there's no explanation for his meltdown, but the numbers of 17.8 points per game in the finals just wasn't enough for the Kings' caliber. Now 2012, the Oklahoma City Thunder lost to the Miami Heat 4-1. They go to average. This was just the beginning of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Stars like Russell Westbrook, Kevin Durant, and James Harden make their first finals appearance. But this was a very young team as Harden, Westbrook, and KD were all under 24 at the time. Game 1 started with a bang for the Thunder. A dominant 36-point game from KD helped the Thunder bring an 11-point victory and a 1-0 series lead. Unfortunately, after that, Miami had to turn the gears up a notch and they didn't lose again. In the end, LeBron captured his first championship that he wanted so badly, and he put up numbers of 28.6 points, 10.2 rebounds, and 7.4 assists, along with 1.6 steals per game. That was one of LeBron's best performances, and it's a shame that the Thunder never got to keep their big 3 and come back again. 2013, the San Antonio Spurs. They lost in a hard-fought 7-game series to the Miami Heat, so they go under great. And it's difficult to put the 2013 finals into words. Both the Spurs and the Heat were battling very hard in a spectacular series that no one will forget. San Antonio's classic trio of Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginobili were always there for the whole decade. But they welcomed their new star, Kawhi Leonard. Still a raw prospect, Kawhi made big strides over that season and blossomed in the NBA Finals. After an unforgettable Game 6, it all came down to Game 7, where Tim Duncan put a strong stat line of 24 points, 12 rebounds, and 4 steals. The Claw also had an impressive performance of 19 points and 16 rebounds. But LeBron's 37 points and 12 rebounds and the game-stealing bucket over Kawhi Leonard pushed Miami to get their second title in 2 years. Now 2014, the Miami Heat lost to the San Antonio Spurs 4-1. We're going to put them under good. Now this was a rematch of the previous season, and that was one of the most exciting series we had ever seen. But unfortunately, the sequel didn't live up to the hype of the original. The Miami Heat were chasing after an opportunity to three-peat. Back-to-back titles for LeBron, he was trying to build a dynasty. However, injuries to both D Wade and Chris Bosh played a major factor. This put immense pressure on LeBron and the rest of the team. Once the finals began, it was clear that the Spurs had the advantage. And Kawhi Leonard, he was the X factor, and this series was his coming out party. In the final 3 games, he averaged 23.7 points, 9.3 rebounds, 2 steals, and 2 blocks. He did that on an incredible 68.6% shooting from the field and 53.8% from deep. All that to say, he became the 3rd youngest Finals MVP of all time. By the end of the series, the Spurs had won by a Finals record margin of 70 points. The Heat were definitely a good opponent, but that just tells you how good that 2014 Spurs team was. 2015, the Cleveland Cavaliers lost to the Golden State Warriors 4-2. We're going to put them as good. Now, this team is one of the biggest what-if NBA final teams that we ever seen. 2 franchises that hadn't seen much success in the last 50 years, now pitted against each other for the first NBA Finals appearances of the decade. However, Kevin Love went out versus Celtics, and Kyrie Irving went out too. So therefore LeBron, he had to go Superman mode, and he did so. Along with a surprise coming out party from Matthew Dellavedova kept this one interesting. Luckily for the Warriors, Andre Iguodala came up big while Steph Curry went through a drive spell. The gritty defense from Iguodala and Draymond Green, along with of course the Splash Brothers, was just too much. Next year, 2016, Golden State Warriors lost to the Cleveland Cavaliers 4-3. Of course, this was a record-breaking season for them, so they go under great. But this was the greatest comeback in NBA history. Although the Cavs and Warriors played each other in the finals for 4 straight years, this year was the most fun to watch. By the time the finals started, the tension between the two teams was as high as it could get. Both teams talking big smack to each other. The Dubs quickly smacked down the Cavs in the first 4 games, taking a dominant 3-1 lead. But we all know what happened next. LeBron James and Kyrie Irving combined for a legendary 82 points combined in Game 5. The Dubs didn't have Draymond Green, but that's his own fault. He should be kicking people in the nuts. And King James responded in Game 6 with 41 points and 11 assists. Despite multiple blowouts for both teams, the series came to a complete deadlock with both teams stuck at 621 points in a decisive Game 7. And of course, LeBron came back with an iconic chase down block over Iggy, followed by the classic Kyrie Irving step back 3-pointer over Steph Curry. The final buzzer rang in Cleveland. They ended their drought. 2017 Cleveland Cavaliers lost to Golden State once again 4-1. Average. The basketball world was real shocked when Kevin Durant announced he was going to join the Golden State Warriors. Now all respect to KD, but that move was weak. They were fresh off a 73-game win series, and it just felt like nothing else could be unfair. To no one's surprise, the Warriors ran through the Western Conference easily, but then they matched up with LeBron, Kyrie, Kevin Love, and the Cavs. Now this time LeBron had a bit more help, but with Golden State adding KD, it just wasn't fair. KD led all scorers with 35.2 points per game, along with 8.2 rebounds, 5.4 assists, and 1.6 blocks per game, along with 1 steal per game. KD got his finals MVP, and of course, that 3-point dagger over LeBron in Game 3 was the most memorable moment, and most likely, his most iconic shot of his career. 2018, the Cavs again. They got swept with a broom 4-0 to the Warriors. At least they tried. This was the last of their 4 meetings with each other in the finals, right before LeBron went to LA. But LeBron went in, had 51 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists in Game 1. But of course, an overturned charge call and a boneheaded play by J.R. Smith. That was their one chance to get some momentum in the series, and after Game 1, the series was essentially over. Golden State went on to win the series in a sweep and the second team to win back-to-back titles this decade. Kevin Durant won Finals MVP, 28.8 points per game and 10.8 rebounds. 2019 Golden State Warriors lost to the Raptors 4-2. Good. The Warriors were gearing up for their 5th straight finals appearance and looking to get a three-peat, but they learned the hard way. Injuries ravaged the Warriors early in the postseason. In the first 2 rounds, both DeMarcus Cousins and KD fell to injuries. It only got worse in the finals when KD ruptured his Achilles in Game 5, only for Klay Thompson to tear his ACL in Game 6. As for the Raptors, health and luck were on their side. At the perfect time, every player on the team stepped up. Pascal Siakam had an explosive 32 points in Game 1, while Marc Gasol, Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet, and Danny Green all had their moments in the series. Overall, a total of 6 Raptors averaged double-digit scoring, opposed to Golden State, who only had 3. And Kawhi was the man. At the end of the day, he averaged 28.5 points and 9.2 rebounds in the finals. Kawhi also got his 2nd Finals MVP and shut down any three-peat talk by Golden State. And now at 2020, the Miami Heat lost to the LA Lakers 4-2. Good. The Heat were the 5th seed in the East, becoming the 3rd lowest seed ever to get to the finals. And this matchup was the first time that both finals teams had both missed the playoffs in the previous season. The Heat swept the Pacers and upset the #1 seed Milwaukee Bucks in a 5-game series, and then they beat Boston in a competitive 6-game series in the Eastern Conference Finals. But despite all of Jimmy Butler's efforts was 26.2 points, 8.3 rebounds, 9.8 assists, and 2.2 steals in the finals, the Heat just wasn't enough for LeBron and AD. LeBron averaged 29.8 points, 11.8 rebounds, and 8.5 assists in his 6-game series to get his 4th title, and also got his 4th Finals MVP. Now that does it. That wraps it up. Please give us a like, subscribe to the Sports Plug Nation by the bell, and as always, thank you for watching.